Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Noir Central Station. Today we're going to be talking about 1948's An Act of Murder. This was released by Universal Pictures, and this stars Frederick March. And the reason why I'm saying it like that is because I've filmed this like 3 other times, and for some reason I was having an issue saying that. I don't know why. Also Edmund O'Brien, who is another mainstay in noir movies. There's so many with him in it. And so we'll talk a little bit about him later. So this came out in 1948. It's directed by Michael Gordon, written by Michael Blanford and Robert Thorin. And so this movie is about a lawyer, played by Edmund O'Brien, who is defending a judge, played by Frederick March, who drove his terminally ill wife off a cliff and then turned himself in. So that's a lot to kind of untangle right there. So first and foremost, most of this movie actually is not what that's about, and I was actually kind of shocked. Most of this movie is about the relationship between Edmund O'Brien's character and March's character, who is the judge. So March plays the judge. He's like an older judge, more traditional. He interprets the law in a very traditional way, whereas Edmund O'Brien's character is more, new school, and he thinks that some of the old ways of interpreting it is kind of archaic and out of date. So they had this like kind of conflict because they know of each other, the judge, a lawyer. And what makes matters even more difficult for both of them is that Edmund O'Brien is also in a relationship with March's daughter, Ellie, played by Geraldine Brooks. And so most of the movie is actually that relationship. And I would go as far as to say that it's more about that than it is about March and his wife, who really doesn't even start to show kind of any like sicknesses or illnesses for a while into the movie. And so it's really funny to kind of see this like just contrast of opinions. And there's a scene at the beginning of the movie where O'Brien's there to pick up his date, and March is there with some other guys that are around his age. They're talking about law and stuff, and so he comes in, and March just tries to like be the man on top by saying, looking down on him, saying, what makes you feel that way about this law or that law? And so it just sets off this relationship that's kind of contentious a little bit to begin with. So his wife starts showing symptoms of some kind of illness, and she's suffering because of it. And as the synopsis says, there's a little car accident and she is dead, and he turns himself in, and Edmund O'Brien is chosen to be the lawyer to defend him. And it really is a big difference from their relationship at the beginning of the movie, because March is literally putting his life in O'Brien's hands. So that's the climax. That's the third act of the movie, is the trial. So does he or does he not get off? Were there other things in play? I guess you'll have to watch it and find out. So first and foremost, this is not a movie that's like, when you think of noir, you don't think of this movie, because it isn't full of shadows and darkness and stuff like that. But, obviously there's a murder, quote unquote, involved. There's lawyers, there's people probably going to prison for the rest of their lives. It's everything that, you see in other noir movies. So this doesn't have shadows and all that kind of stuff all over the place. In fact, most of the movie takes place during the day. Brightly lit sets. There's nothing really that stands out from a cinematography standpoint. It's a really run-of-the-mill production, and that's probably why it doesn't really have a whole backstory to it, like in terms of drama behind the scenes, because it seems like, you know, they made a movie, they released it, and there you go. So it was also released with the title Live Today for Tomorrow and I Stand Accused. And as you see by the poster, they really are big on those like little taglines like, will he or will he not get off? Am I a murderer? Like that kind of stuff that you see. So a couple interesting tidbits. One is that this movie was actually, it caused Universal Pictures to actually have to build a town square set for where this was all taking place. That set, the courthouse and everything, is what we now know as the set, the Back to the Future, you know, set from the Back to the Future and Gremlins and a bunch of other movies. It was built for this movie. So I would actually say that this movie is actually, or that the setting for this movie is more famous than the movie itself, because I had actually never heard of this before. So also another little nugget, which was kind of funny when I was looking at the director, Michael Gordon. He directed so many noirs, but he also did Pillow Talk, which is a favorite in this household. And it's interesting, I realized that by looking at his bio, that his grandson is Joseph Gordon-Levitt. So of Angels in the Outfield fame and many other things. But yeah, I thought that was a fun little nugget. And so this series is just me saying nuggets all the time. So I said I was going to get back to Edmund O'Brien. So here's the funny thing about Edmund O'Brien. He's always like been older to me in my head. You know, I first knew of him from The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance as Peabody, you know, the newspaper man. And he was in like a quick scene in like The Longest Day, obviously The Wild Bunch. And so I always saw him with a beard. And I remember when I first saw The Hitchhiker, Ida Lupino's movie, and DOA, I was like, man, I've never seen Edmund O'Brien without a beard other than in The Longest Day. I would say actually 90% of the movies I've seen him in now, he doesn't even have a beard. So, but what I'm getting at is it's really funny because he's actually, you know, it was in 1948, he was a lot younger, and he's actually like considered like and talked about by March and other characters, older characters, like, oh, that's just a young guy. He's a young radical lawyer. And it's just interesting when I'm watching the movie because I'd never think of Edmund O'Brien as the young guy. He's usually, you know, just a regular guy, and then eventually, like, he's the more seasoned veteran actor that I originally knew him as. So, anyways, this movie is really good. I highly recommend it. It is not one of those film noirs that are, you know, full of suspense and, you know, terrible characters and all that kind of thing. But it's still a really good film noir. I highly recommend it, especially if you're into movies like that deal with law. And it kind of has a message for and against like mercy killings and that whole argument. So it does leave with that kind of argument. So yeah, there's that. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one.